Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just about 30 seconds. Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome to this virtual Madison Civics Club program, where today we will hear about the job and the role of a newspaper editorial cartoonist. I'm Joy Cardine, co-chair of the Madison Civics Club, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Phil Hands, the editorial cartoonist for the Wisconsin State Journal. His bio describes him as a fierce political moderate, whose cartoons will go after the extremes on both the right and the left. We will find out over this next hour how Phil goes about his job. We'll see some examples of his work, and we'll see him in action. That will be fun, drawing a cartoon. We'll learn about the analytical and creative process that goes into editorial cartooning on the issues in the news. And we will take your questions for him after his presentation. Please type them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and I will share them with him when he's done. Besides the Wisconsin State Journal, Phil's cartoons have appeared in USA Today, Newsweek, Time, and the Washington Post, among others. He has won a number of awards for editorial cartooning. He is a graduate of Kenyon College in Ohio. He received his master's degree from UW-Madison. He lives in Madison with his wife, Tricia, and two children, Owen and Claire. And I recently learned that today is Owen's birthday, and Phil's got a birthday party to attend right after he's done here. Thanks, Phil, for being with us.
Oh, it's not actually Owen's birthday today. It was on Thursday, but no one wants to have a birthday party on a Thursday evening. So
it's birthday party day. Okay, good.
Birthday party day.
Wonderful. We'll take it away.
I think the bio used to say he was adorable, but he's 13 and now he's like a teenager. And
yeah,
huge.
Good luck to you. That's a big one.
Thank you, Joy, for that wonderful introduction. I'm Phil Hands, everyone, and I'm going to just share with you some of my cartoons, my process, what I do, and all sort of the roles I have at the newspaper. So let's see here. As a political cartoonist, I spend a lot of time drawing political figures. I've done a lot of cartoons about this guy. We all know who that is. Good old Joe Biden, except in my cartoons, he looks a bit more like this. I do a little goofy caricature. I like to accentuate he's got that politician smile that's so bright you could light up the room with it. And sometimes I decide to make him cool. I add some sunglasses to him, because he loves those sunglasses. I also do a lot of cartoons about this guy, Tony Evers, the governor of Wisconsin. He's got sort of that nerdy look that I like to accentuate on my cartoons. He looks more like this. He always sort of has this jovial grin on him, and he's just trying to get everyone to get along, which doesn't always work in Wisconsin. But I spent a lot of time drawing cartoons about this guy. This was a little harder. He was easy to caricature, but it was a long 4 years of drawing cartoons about this guy. In my cartoons, he would look more like that. Sort of accentuated the size and the weight and the hair and the anger. And so any editorial cartoon really has several key aspects to it. So first of all, you want the image to be engaging. So I try and make my cartoons fun to look at. There's always sort of activity going on. I don't like the cartoons that are just sort of two talking heads, although I occasionally have to do them. But I want the artwork to be compelling and fun to look at. I like to add humor to all of my cartoons if I can, because humor is a way to engage people, but it's also disarming. So it's easier to get a point across if you have somebody laughing at what's going on first. And maybe that changes their mind. Maybe they're more open to something because it's humorous. And then finally, every editorial cartoon has to really have a strong point of view. People often think of editorial cartoonists as just, there's funny drawings about the news. And that's not what a cartoon is. Occasionally, a cartoon is just a funny drawing about the news. But I like to think of myself much more as a columnist for like a newspaper who instead of writing thousands of words, I draw pictures. And so it's always about having a strong point of view and a very strong opinion behind the cartoon to get your message across. And you're using the artwork to share your opinion. And so that's really a key component of any editorial cartoon. And now I'm going to show you the cartoon. It's been online, but it's not appearing in the paper until Sunday. But this is Sunday's editorial cartoon for the Wisconsin State Journal. It's about the most important issue in Wisconsin, Aaron Rodgers and the vaccine. And so this is a young girl, kind of based off of an image of my daughter, who's will be 9 in December. She says, "Wow, I'm braver and tougher than Aaron Rodgers." And the doctor says, "Smarter too." So that was a fun cartoon. It's been fun to kind of poke fun at Aaron Rodgers over this vaccine flap. This was the cartoon I did the day we heard about the vaccine, about him catching COVID and not being vaccinated. And it's the super spreader MVP, COVID-19, hack, hike. This was a fun cartoon to draw. I'm not great at drawing football players. I'd rather draw baseball players, but people love the Packers in Wisconsin. And I think the next slide is actually, you can follow along as I show you how I kind of draw a cartoon. Oops, nope, you can't. Hold on. I was working before. There it goes. So here is the, I start with pencil and paper oftentimes with my cartoons. And I just kind of build up the layers of pencil until I have it just the way I like it. And this one with these football players kneeling down, kind of a hard angle to draw. So I kind of penciled it a lot to make sure I had it just the way I wanted it to be. And after it's penciled in, I actually take a brush that I dip into ink. And I use that to do the outlines of the image. You can see that's what I'm doing right there. It's actually like a watercolor brush that I would use. And it's using that to get the outlines. It adds a lot of line quality, and it makes it interesting to look at. Now, once the ink work is done along the lines, I'll come back in with like a marker or a pen, and I do the lettering, and then I sort of add the cross hatching and the little details with a little micron pen. It's an artist pen, which I use for just all these little details here. And it makes it, sort of come alive a little bit. And I sign my name to it. And then the color is all done via the computer after the fact, which is less interesting to see. But anyway, so I work at the State Journal. I actually have a lot of duties there. I'm on so I draw the political cartoons in the newspaper. I'm on the editorial board, so I spend lots of time meeting with public officials. We had a meeting this last week with Megan Wolf from the Wisconsin Elections Commission to figure out how she's doing after Robin Voss called for her resignation. I'm on the editorial board, so I help craft the editorials that run in the newspaper, deciding what we're going to write about. The editorial board used to consist of just staff members at the State Journal, but this last year we added 3 community members. The 3 members we've added were Wayne Strong, who's a former police officer in Madison, Janine Geske, who is a former Supreme Court justice, and Susan Schmitz, who used to run Downtown Madison Inc. And they've just been a great asset to our board to really broaden our perspectives, and they've been great for adding ideas for editorials and doing research and figuring out what's really important to the community. So I'm really honored that they've joined our editorial board. The other task that I have at the State Journal, which is sort of interesting, is I edit all the letters to the editor. Which is it's a hard job. It's time consuming, but I really find it gives me a great window into what Madison cares about. Reading letters is a great way to see what community cares about, and that's really good for coming up with cartoon ideas. I found that my cartoons are better now that I'm reading all these letters from readers about what they care about, and I find that Madison readers in general are very earnest, and we have good letter writers in our community for the most part. So please, if you're a letter writer, or if you ever have any interest in writing a letter to the editor, send it our way, and we will do what we can to publish it. We love hearing community voices. Another thing I do at the State Journal is the YouTube Caption contest. This Sunday's YouTube Caption contest is again about Aaron Rodgers, because it seems to be all people are talking about in Wisconsin, and so people will often I publish these on Sundays mornings in the newspaper, and then the next Sunday we run the winning caption to go with it. And so people will submit their captions. I don't know. I don't have an idea what this should be right now, but if you have any thoughts, send it our way. You can even add it to the chat if you want to, but Rodgers missing the game and watching Jordan Love play in his place. That's going to be this Sunday's YouTube Caption contest. One of my other things I'm passionate about at the State Journal, and I'm really glad they let me do this, was I do this comic strip called Mendota Marsh, which is I became a political cartoonist because I loved Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip, and I loved comics from the newspaper. I'm not really a comic book guy, but I loved the newspaper comic strips. And so Mendota Marsh became my sort of way of entering that. And it's not nearly as good as Calvin and Hobbes, but it's a little bit autobiographical. I'm a lot like the fox whose name is Oscar. And it's about what's going on in our community, what I care about. So the first strip, which ran in the summer, was Oscar talking to Lewis the crane saying, "Lewis, I'm throwing a party to celebrate my new smoker. Want to come over and eat some barbecue? What are you grilling at this barbecue? Veggie brats, black bean burgers, soy dogs? I'm not grilling anything. This is real barbecue. I'm doing smoked brisket, ribs, and pulled pork. Are you going to offer a vegan option? Well, I suppose there's no meat in these paper napkins. I bet they're high in fiber too." So that's just sort of a generic comic about something I care about, which is smoking meat. Often the strip gets kind of political. It talks a lot about Madison issues. Oscar and Lewis spend a lot of time on State Street, and so they care a lot about the bus rapid transit on State Street and and they're both excited about the idea of a pedestrian mall. I know Oscar is. And so this is just sort of a Halloween gag, which has Lewis dressed up as a bus rapid transit station, which angers a lot of State Street business owners. I'm a bus rapid transit station. That ought to scare those State Street business owners. What are you supposed to be? I'm a pedestrian enjoying State Street. That ought to scare the mayor, because I know that she's pretty adamantly opposed to a pedestrian mall on State Street. So it's just a way of entering a little bit of political humor into a kind of a local comic strip. It's a great way to connect with readers, a great way to connect with Madison. I'm a big fan of doing the Mendota Marsh, and I hope people like it. I don't get. And another thing that I do with the State Journal during football season is I do these daily or these weekly game day cartoons about the Badgers and their opponents they're taking on in the often Big Ten, but any school is game for these cartoons. And it's hard. I've been doing these for a long time, and I have to figure out a new way to draw Iowa or Illinois every year. And I was pretty happy with this one. This was kind of a Halloween themed one again, with Bucky the Scarecrow scaring the Iowa Hawkeyes in the football field the cornfield full of footballs. Thought that was a fun image. And then I did Illinois was fun this year because they have the former Badgers coach Brett Bielema is now the coach of Illinois, and here's Bielema saying, "Hey Bucky, remember me? How could I possibly forget you, Bert?" So that's sort of playing off the old Brett Favre "We'll never forget you, Brent" gag that they when Brett Favre left for the Minnesota Vikings, 13 years ago. Anyway. Oh, and finally, one of the other passionate things I do at the State Journal is this podcast with my editor, Scott Milfred. It's called Center Stage with Milfred at Hands. The podcast is available on all platforms. You can find it on Madison.com. And we just basically talk about issues in the news. And we're pretty lighthearted. They've called us the click and clack of Wisconsin politics. But we just chat about what's going on in our community. Recent podcasts were for Halloween. We did the scariest things about Wisconsin politics. We did a podcast about keeping the schools open and which Democrat can defeat Ron Johnson. And a lot of podcasts about State Street and the pedestrian mall, which has sort of been a campaign the State Journal has been on to get people considering a pedestrian mall in downtown Madison on State Street. But so I want to share with you mostly a lot of my editorial cartoons because that's what I'm really the most passionate about. It's what I love doing. So you can see this. I've been doing some cartoons about Joe Biden. This is another Halloween themed cartoon. And this is Joe Biden in the pumpkin patch with Linus from Peanuts. "Welcome, great spending bill." And Linus has sign says, "Welcome, great pumpkin." And Linus says, "I wouldn't get your hopes up." Although it looks like the spending bill might get done, it's not what it was initially intended to be. And then here's another Halloween themed cartoon. This is about the investigation into the 2020 election in Wisconsin. And the homeowner says, "Adorable, a ghost, a witch, and Michael Gableman dressed as a clown." That was a fun cartoon because Michael Gableman is the former Supreme Court justice who's running this investigation. Is totally a clown. when it comes to investigating voter fraud. And sometimes cartoons are just silly and goofy. This was about the new Curter burger at Culver's, which is that the burger that's got the giant cheese curd on top of it. So this guy saying, I want to try the new Curter burger with the giant cheese curd on it. Would you like that with or without an angioplasty? And that was just kind of a fun cartoon about goofy things in the news. But sometimes cartoons are goofy. Sometimes they're very serious, and sometimes they're even sad. Like this was one of the hardest cartoons I had to draw. I drew this on election night 2016. And this is this was actually a cartoon idea. Was inspired by the editor of the newspaper at the time, John Smalley, who was saying, he had visited this gallery that had a picture of all these presidents. This was during the 2016 election, and we were in our endorsement meeting, like, and we were going to endorse Hillary Clinton, and he was in this gallery. He's like, Donald Trump just doesn't belong with all these austere photographs of or paintings of presidents. And I sort of envisioned that for 2016. I did this cartoon the night of the election, and it's George Washington looking at Trump saying, "There goes the neighborhood." And I think that is held up. That has stood the test of time. That cartoon. That election night in 2016, I really hoped to be drawing this cartoon instead. This was Hillary Clinton with votes for women, and hopefully at some point I'll get to draw a cartoon about a woman getting elected to the White House. Although it probably will not be Hillary Clinton. So I actually had drawn this cartoon up. I was so convinced that Hillary was going to win because I was watching the polls like I was supposed to be doing. And the polls all said that it looked like she was going to win before election. So I'd done this in the afternoon on election day. And then I had to change gears election night and draw the Donald Trump cartoon instead, that was a hard night. Of course, when Donald Trump became president, he was stepping in, he was following the footsteps of Barack Obama with big shoes to fill. And Obama says, I believe the word you're looking for is huge, which I thought was a nice gag. And then, of course, 4 years after Trump's inauguration, I got to do a cartoon about making America great again, which is Joe Biden getting inaugurated. And I think, as much as I point out a lot of flaws of Joe Biden, it really has been nice to have someone who's not Donald Trump be our president. And I think his sort of boringness is what's so great. This is a cartoon from the campaign in 2020. This is Average Joe, and the person says he's not exciting or inspiring. He's pretty boring. Boring sounds great. And there's the 24/7 Trumpster fire. But I do poke fun at Joe Biden or criticize him when I feel like it's necessary. This is a young Afghan girl clutching her education, and Joe Biden says, sorry, you're just not a vital national security concern. So I do find it necessary to poke fun at Biden when appropriate, even though I agree with him much more than I ever agreed with Donald Trump on anything. I did this cartoon during the primary in 2016, was as people were Joe Biden was not the candidate that most people wanted, it felt like. A lot of progressives were upset with him. So this was a political primer for progressives. Cons about Joe Biden: not liberal enough, not a fan of Medicare for all, not a fan of free tuition, not a pacifist, not woke, not articulate, not coherent, not an outsider, not a woman, not a person of color, not young, not respectful of women's personal space. Pros: he's not Trump. So that was my cartoon about what is so great about Joe Biden. And then, you know what? I'm going to take a little break here, and I'm going to show you guys how I go about drawing a Joe Biden real quick. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. And I hope people can see my screen. Let's see here. So I like to draw Joe Biden. The first thing you want to do is start off with his mouth, and you're going to lose my face here as I start drawing here. But I like to start off with his mouth. He's got that big smile. 1,000-watt smile, light up a room. Now, sometimes it's so big it goes like on the outside of his mouth. He's got a chin that's sort of got that little divot in his chin. His neck is usually a little bit folder there. And then his nose. It's a little bit crooked, I've noticed, with his nose. I have to get a couple lines above the mouth just to emphasize the fact that he is one of the oldest presidents we've ever had. He's got these little ears. He's got actually pretty thick eyebrows, which I always mix them up like that. I didn't like that. That's the thing about drawing digitally now. I draw a lot of cartoons on a computer. I can just sort of erase the line easily. He's got this fun wispy hair. It used to be long. It's not as long as it used to be, but it's still fun to make it long from cartoons. I feel like I can take a cartoonist license when I'm drawing somebody. And if they had a hairstyle like that at one point, I can still do it. So there's Joe Biden. Of course, if you want to make him cool, you just got to add the aviators here. There's a cool Joe Biden. So yeah, there's a drawing of Joe Biden. And I'll do a couple of, I'll go back to the, let me just go back and we'll continue talking about some of these cartoons here. Okay, yeah. So this cartoon, sometimes us cartoonists are really wise. I hate to say it, but this cartoon, I believe, either appeared in the January 5th or January 6th State Journal of this year. And it was Republicans wondering if they should pick between democracy or Trump. And the Republicans saying, wow, this is worse than Sophie's Choice. And unfortunately, as we know, the vast majority of Republicans decided to side with Trump as opposed to democracy after the horrendous insurgents and attack at the Capitol on January 6th. This was the cartoon I did in the aftermath of that, which is the people cleaning up the Capitol saying, so this is making America great again. As we can see, the Trump flag, over on top of Lincoln, and the Confederate flag in the corner. If you do look at cartoons, I mean, I often like to add a lot of details to the backgrounds of cartoons. They're not necessarily necessary to get what's going on, but they help tell a more complete story. So when you're looking at my cartoons in the newspaper, and if you see stuff in the background, have a look at it, because I'm usually adding to the story with details in the background. And so we all want to know what led to January 6th. And we wanted to have, people wanted to have a commission, a bipartisan commission, which the Republicans refused to hold, to get to why did January 6th happen? How did it get so out of hand? And I have Uncle Sam here saying, I want the truth, and Republicans saying, I can't handle the truth, from that great film, is that Few Good Men? Jack Nicklaus yelling that at Tom Cruise. Anyway, I thought that was a fitting way to describe that situation with the commission. And I did this cartoon after the Congress refused to impeach Donald Trump for his culpability with the January 6th riots and the attack on our democracy. And so here's Uncle Sam talking to the Statue of Liberty with democracy, saying they caught the guy, but he got off on a technicality, which is, I feel, very much what happened in the second impeachment of Trump. And to this day, we're still dealing with the aftermath of January 6th, and people, lots of people just don't have faith in our democracy anymore because conservative politicians, starting with Trump, have told them not to have faith in our democracy. And all of these questions about how legitimate are their democracies and all these investigations, they're not designed to make people have more faith in our democracy. They're designed to give people less faith. And so I did this cartoon. This is Michael Gableman, the former Supreme Court justice in Wisconsin, who was leading this probe into Wisconsin's elections. And you can see his probe is destroying the columns and pillars of democracy. And he says, our probe will ensure the structure's integrity. And that's not the case at all. And so I thought that was for whatever reason, I've decided that drawing democracy means you have to draw something with Greco-Roman columns on it, but I feel like it works. And then I have Robin Voss and Michael Gableman explaining why they're doing the investigation. And so Voss says here very, very honestly, and sometimes a cartoon is just saying what is going on in the world. This is Voss saying, the goal of our $680,000 full forensic audit isn't to overturn the 2020 election. The goal is to keep Donald Trump from saying mean things about us. And so that you can see the empty box of evidence of fraud. And sometimes I just come out and say exactly what's going on in the news. And that's exactly what's going on with his investigations, to keep Trump from saying mean things about Voss and Republicans in Wisconsin. We have a Republican senator in Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, who sort of denied the seriousness of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. A direct quote from him was, "Didn't seem like an armed insurrection to me." And we can see people attacking a police officer on the ground in the background. Ron Johnson's also been sort of an anti-vaxxer and been questioning of COVID protocols. This is Johnson saying, well, another quote that he said, like, "What do you care if your neighbor has a vaccine or not?" And you can see the COVID wildfire in one house, and the person next door, is nervous about will it spread to them. And we saw that happen this late summer and fall with the Delta variant, where people who had got vaccinated ended up getting breakthrough infections because there was so much vaccine or so much virus in so many communities because people weren't vaccinated, and the virus can spread like wildfire if it doesn't run into a vaccinated person, and then people can get sick and die because of it, even if you have been smart and gotten the vaccine. And then I'm a big fan of the TV show The Simpsons, and so sometimes I'll let Homer do this talking for me. The buffoon from The Simpsons, Homer Simpson, says, "Is it me, or does this guy seem to get dumber each week?" That's Ron Johnson, and the newspaper, the Springfield Shopper, which my editor thought was a great name for a newspaper. But yeah, I mean, Homer, that was one of the critiques of The Simpsons, that every week it seems like Homer gets dumber and dumber. And for a while, it felt like every week Ron Johnson was getting dumber and dumber. But on top of all of the politics this year, there's been a mashup of politics and COVID-19, and a lot of my cartoons will address the fact that that's been sort of all that we've been talking about in the news, is these two things. And so this is a cartoon that sort of matches that up. This is Uncle Sam getting his booster, and the booster is impeachment 2.0, and I sure hope this booster can rid me of this virus for good. Unfortunately, it didn't. The second impeachment of Trump did not get rid of Trump for good, but at least he's not on Twitter anymore, which makes my life a lot better. This was the first cartoon I did about the coronavirus back in February of last year. And this was just sort of, I thought it was an interesting image of the Wicked Witch of the West as the virus, and saying, "I'm melting, what a world, who knew soap and water could destroy my beautiful wickedness." It was just a sort of PSA cartoon on getting people to wash their hands, which I think we're all washing our hands better now. So that's one upside of the COVID-19 virus. This cartoon is from last May, when people were donning masks on a consistent basis, and we still should be, and we are in places. What your face mask says about you. The Brewers fan is a true fan. The Star Wars fanatic is a geek. The guy with the smiley face is a funny guy, and the guy without a mask is a jerk. So I think that cartoon still holds true today. And of course, where did Wisconsinites go as soon as the lockdown was over? Hey, alcohol is a disinfectant. We had all those social media posts of people cramming into bars as soon as the Supreme Court knocked down the lockdown orders in Wisconsin. Of course, our legislature didn't lift a finger throughout the course of the pandemic to do anything to support any mitigations to keep people healthy and safe. So this is Speaker Voss, office of the Assembly Speaker. "What are these hospital beds doing in my office?" Well, the ICU was full and nobody was working here. I thought that was cartoon made a really strong point about the lack of action from the legislature. And then, of course, on top of this virus stuff, the entire political party seems to be eschewing when it comes to either climate change or the virus. People just aren't believing in science anymore. So I imagine, what does this do for science education? Here's a kid and his dad's upset about getting an F on his science homework, and the kid says, "It's okay. When I grow up, I'm going to be a Republican lawmaker. And I thought that cartoon, made a good point. And this is one of my favorite cartoons because I'm vaccinated. I wear a mask in public when it's necessary, but I do feel like Dane County is, ham-handed with their response to the COVID-19, with our extended mask mandates. People here, and I feel like people in Dane County really have good judgment when it comes to what to do. So here's a Dane County person saying, I'm fully vaccinated and I wear a mask indoors in public when it seems appropriate. And the Dane County official says, sorry, we can't trust your judgment. Whereas statewide, we have this guy who's not vaxxed and doesn't wear a mask. And he says, I saw on the interwebs that COVID is a hoax. And of course, our state legislature says, well, clearly we should trust his judgment. I just find it a little bit silly that the state, the county with the best judgment also has the strongest restrictions on it. And of course, here's another anti-vaxxer cartoon, the sheep saying, it looks like we could be getting close to herd immunity with the anti-vaxxers as the wolf in sheep's clothing. And then one last cartoon about the vaccine. And this is one thing that just drives me nuts is this guy saying, heck no, I ain't getting no vaccine. The internet says there's a chance it may be bad for my health, says the guy drinking a beer, eating a cheeseburger with fries and a milkshake and cheese curds and smoking a cigarette. That's just sort of the irony of the world we live in nowadays. Now, the other major issue, another major issue of 2020, and that's crept into 2021, has been, police brutality and the death of George Floyd, which has inspired this racial reckoning in America. And I did this cartoon shortly after Floyd's death, which is racism helping to kill him, and the virus saying, and I thought I was a heinous and incurable virus. I did this cartoon after Trump cleared that the protest streets, so we could walk across the street and get his picture taken with the Bible. And I thought it was a fitting to kind of compare that to Tiananmen Square and how brave these protesters have been in the face of overwhelming authority from the state and police. Of course, I do feel like sometimes the protesters have gone too far. I don't know what defund the police means, and I don't think it's helpful in any way, shape, or form. I did this cartoon about that. What does defund police mean? And then one person says it means reallocating law enforcement resources for more mental health and social services. The other person says it means dismantling the police and replacing them with community groups. It means anarchy. And what does Trump think it means? It means scared voters in the suburbs might actually reelect me. And so I think, that whole talking point of defund the police has been a gift to Republicans, and it's not helpful at all to, real meaningful criminal justice reform, which is what we actually need. And I did this cartoon after Derek Chauvin was found guilty of murder. And it's a quote from Martin Luther King. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, with the idea that George Floyd, the tragedy of his death has bent us slightly more towards justice, hopefully. Of course, people do come at me all the time and complain that I'm disrespectful of the president, and I'm disrespectful of the office of the president. To which, this person is saying, stop disrespecting the office of the president. To which I respond, that's me in my little vest and my shirt at my desk at the office. I'll stop when he stops. And this is one of those cartoons where it's fun to look at the little details. You can see I'm drawing a cartoon. I've got my signature there. My desk at the office is actually full of pinups of, this is an older cartoon, so it's got Soglin as the mayor and Trump and Tony Evers. I actually have pictures of them on my desk for reference. And then I've got pictures of my kids in the background, which is sort of nice. I have been kind of hard on the president. Trump is a slug. There isn't a racist bone in my body, but he usually deserves it. I did this cartoon after Charlottesville. Barack Obama inspired many young Americans, and there's the young African-American kid. When I grow up, I want to be president like Obama. And then so is Trump. He's inspired all these wacko nut jobs. We forget that back in 2016, there was a while where Scott Walker, our former governor, was leading in the polls for president. And on the national stage, Republicans are treating Scott Walker like a new puppy. Well, aren't you just the most conservative little thing? Back in Wisconsin, we find it less cute that after 4 years, he's still not housebroken. Yeah, isn't that the truth? Isn't it silly and weird to think how much better off our country would be if Scott Walker had actually become president instead of Donald Trump? I mean, that's a weird thought, but I think we'd be much better off with Walker as opposed to Trump. And everyone in that 2016 election thought that they were being called to run by God, and they were, so Ted Cruz said, "God has called me to run." Ben Carson said, "God has called me to run." Mike Huckabee said, "God has called me to run." Scott Walker said, "God has called me to run." And I imagined God up in heaven saying, "Lousy wrong numbers. Does anyone know how this iWatch works?" I thought that cartoon, it's kind of making fun of technology. It's making fun of these Republicans. That cartoon did very well, online. I believe it got shared actually hundreds of thousands of times on Facebook. And that's one of sort of the weird things that is hard about our new media is, I don't think I've ever had a cartoon that was as widely distributed as this one is. I didn't make any more money because of that. The State Journal didn't make any more money of that because of that. I think Facebook made a lot of money because of the popularity of this cartoon. And so how do we move forward in this? Us cartoonists are dealing with this sad irony that people see our work more than ever before, but there's no way to monetize it like they used to be. I mean, it used to be if you worked at a newspaper and 100,000 people saw your cartoon that day, that was really good exposure. And now millions of people see our cartoons every day because of social media, but it doesn't translate into dollars, which is really frustrating. Oh, this was another fun cartoon about the 2016 election. Which candidate is the cheesiest? I did this cartoon when the candidates came to Wisconsin. So Hillary Clinton was like cheddar. She was familiar and bland, but not that bad. Bernie Sanders was like brie, a little too European for the American palate. John Kasich was like mozzarella. He was too soft with a mild flavor that didn't inspire the base. Ted Cruz was like Lindbergh, stinky and offensive, but better than the alternative. And Donald Trump was like processed cheese food product, best to leave it in the plastic wrapper. And of course, my favorite horrible pun from a cartoon is on this one. And you can see that Donald Trump has a hat that says, "Make American cheese great again." Isn't that bad? Oh my God. I love it how bad it is. The 2016 was a little bit weird. So I wanted to get my kids were interested in politics, but I felt like it wasn't appropriate. So TVMA, the following program contains lewd behavior and vulgar language that is unsuitable for children. Honey, the debate is starting. And this is just one of my all-time favorite cartoons. People always criticized Barack Obama that he was being outwitted by Putin, and that Obama was playing checkers and Putin was playing chess. So this is playing the foreign policy game. King me, checkmate, scissors, with Trump playing the more simplistic game. Trump's antics at the border were always disturbing. I've got it. Dragons. We'll put dragons on the border. And his advisor saying, "Who let him watch Game of Thrones?" And I showed this cartoon to a high school class once, and they were very astute. And they said, this kid's like, "Yeah, that's great, because that's one of the problems with Donald Trump. He sees something on TV, and then that's his next policy idea," which I thought was pretty astute for a high schooler. This cartoon was about Trump's Supreme Court picks. And what's kind of funny is I did this one, I think, during the Gorsuch nomination, sort of Trump picking out his who was going to be his next Supreme Court pick. And Trump ponders his Supreme Court pick, and there's all these villains from pop culture. And he says, "But they're also moderate." But, in hindsight, it's sort of, they kind of look like the people that ended up getting picked for the Supreme Court. One's, there's Kavanaugh, there's Gorsuch, and there's Amy Coney Barrett there. So serendipitous. Trump's was dogged by the Mueller investigation into the collusion with Russia during the 2016 election. The investigation didn't make any findings of its own, really, but it did sort of direct Congress to impeach the president. And reading between the lines, this is what Mueller said: "If we had meant that the president was exonerated, we would have actually said so. Congress should hold him accountable," which of course spells out impeach. After the Mueller probe, things got back to normal at the White House. Now that the Mueller report has cleared the president, things can get back to normal at the White House. And this is normal at the White House, a circus. And it was sort of a 24/7 outrage machine, the White House during the Trump administration. I can't even remember all of these scandals that I drew in here. There's something about security clearance for Ivanka and Jared, John Bolton as a clown, Kellyanne Conway throwing brick at her husband, a dumpster fire, a picture of Stormy Daniels. But then, of course, after Trump was cleared of charges in the first impeachment, he was promptly impeached again for his actions, or he wasn't, after he was cleared from the Mueller report, the next day he got on the phone with the president of Ukraine and did something impeachable again, which is, and this is Clue impeachment edition, President Orange did it with the telephone to Ukraine in the Oval Office. And I love that game, Clue. The movie's even better, actually. And here's just another Trump cartoon about his rallies in Wisconsin. My rallies are really firing up voters. Every place I visit turns bright red. Those are COVID hotspots. I actually had to hold off for 2 weeks. I had drawn this cartoon. We were going to pop it in the newspaper the next day, and that day we found out that Trump actually contracted COVID-19. So we thought it would be very poor taste to run this cartoon, the day that he contracted COVID. So we held on to it for a couple of weeks, and unfortunately, it still worked several weeks later. And then we all, there was so much scandal in the Trump administration that we forget some of the bigger things like Stormy Daniels. And I imagine having to explain to your kid, "Hey, Daddy, what did the president do with that weather lady?" And then, of course, there wasn't just Trump. It wasn't just Trump that was creepy, but there was that Alabama Senator Roy Moore, or Senate candidate Roy Moore, who had liaisons with younger girls. Thou shalt not covet thy. He was a Bible thumper and loved the Ten Commandments, and said, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife," but it doesn't say anything about his daughter. And then, it's been a long couple of years, but I think it's still important to kind of remember that despite all the struggles, our flag, we're still America, and we're still the greatest country in the world. And so I did this for 4th of July this last year, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there, despite the urban unrest, COVID, the big lie, and the January 6th. And I've got just a couple of cartoons here about, I'm a big fan. I know this is the Civics Club. I'm a big fan of good government and civic engagement. And sometimes I like to use my cartoons to sort of explain to people how government works, or give people a history. So this is a brief history of executive orders. And you can see, when George W. Bush was signing executive orders, the Republicans loved them, the Democrats hated them. When Obama was signing executive orders, the Democrats loved them, the Republicans hated them. When Trump was signing executive orders, the drill, and then the same with Biden. So people got all up in arms about Biden's executive orders. And it's just important to remind people that we have this debate every 4 to 8 years. Whenever there's a new president, they go and undo everything they can from the last administration. That's just the way we work. This cartoon I thought was nice because this cartoon had very few words in it. I like a cartoon that's just very visual, and it's sort of telling the story of each political party and their interpretation of U.S. history and their exaggerations of it. I think the Democrats are way too quick to dismiss any good that's happened in American history and focus on our dark, nasty, bad parts of our history, which do exist. And Republicans, I feel like, are just super eager to gloss over anything that might be bad about American history and just focus on our heroism and our greatness. And of course, the truth is messy, but I think both parties and both political sides paint a pretty unrealistic picture of U.S. history. This cartoon sort of harkens back to there's this bill proposed in the legislature to have truth in labeling that was going to force different food products to have, was going to make it so that almond milk couldn't be called milk anymore. We have to call it nut juice or something like that. So this is my cartoon about truth in labeling. Milk made from almonds, cheese made from soy, burgers, which aren't really burgers if they're made so milk isn't really milk if it's made from almond milk. Cheese isn't really cheese if it's made from soy. Burgers aren't really burgers if they're made from black beans. And of course, then there's our democracy, made from suppressed votes in gerrymandered districts, which I thought was sort of a nice parallel. And then I think this cartoon is really important. People don't like it, but I think it's an important statement. we have all these angry conservatives, America first, ban Muslims, build the wall. And we have my young idealistic college student yelling, somebody needs to stop this vicious hate speech. No, the right to free speech protects the fundamental right to be wrong, says the ghost of Ben Franklin. And then here's another cartoon just sort of outlining how civics have sort of devolved in our, this is Civics 101 now and then. Back in the day, Congress writes the laws, the president signs the laws, and the Supreme Court interprets the laws. Nowadays, Congress does nothing, the president signs the executive order, and the Supreme Court rules 5-4. And Joy, I can stop here if people want to ask questions, or I have several more slides I could share with people if they wanted to, but I'm happy to answer any questions if people feel like they've had enough of me talking for a while.
Phil, that was outstanding, really, very good. We do have a couple of questions. If you have a question for Phil or an observation, or how about a caption for that Aaron Rodgers watching the football game from his sick chair. Maybe you have a caption you want to type that into chat, or type a question into chat. We will share them with Phil. I was going to say, Phil, I saw in your bio that you are the only full-time cartoonist on the staff of a Wisconsin newspaper, but I didn't realize you have 2 or 3 full-time jobs going there with everything that you're doing. You're not only a cartoonist, you're on the editorial board, and you're involved in all sorts of things, including, as you mentioned, editing the letters to the editor. But I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about the role of the editorial cartoonist when it comes to newspapers. You're the only one?
Well, in Wisconsin, yeah. I mean, yeah. It is an interesting role. I'm really blessed that the State Journal still thinks it's a valuable thing to have, because so many newspapers, that was one of the first things to go, and we all know that newspapers don't have the same kind of resources they used to have. There aren't as many food critics as there used to be. There are very few movie reviewers left. All of these sort of things that make newspapers great, that I think used to make newspapers great, all the cultural stuff, it's sort of been brushed to the side just to make room for, covering the news, which is vital and essential. Now I'd like to think that I'm doing more, and I love food reviews and I love movie reviews. I think they're really awesome and essential. I think the State Journal recognizes that what I'm doing here is more than just drawing funny pictures. It's about commentary. And, Madison's a very political town. We love our politics. We love to make fun of our politics. And so I feel like they recognize it's just a really vital thing to do. But unfortunately, very few newspapers are still employing editorial cartoonists. And I mean, frankly, one of the reasons I still am employed is because I do a lot of things. I serve on the editorial board. I edit letters to the editor. I occasionally write an editorial because, we all have to do more, and we all have to be, innovative to stick around. We all, I'd like to be a jack of all trades if possible. Now I'm doing videos. It wasn't a thing I was doing 2 years ago. I wasn't recording drawings and posting them online to increase reader engagement, but we're all learning new things in this new digital age. And I'm optimistic about the future of journalism. I really am, but it's it's a different world than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Sure is. Are you following the lead of the editorial board, or do you have free reign when it comes to I'm gonna draw and comment on this issue today?
I have a lot of free reign, and it also helps that I'm a pretty significant voice on the editorial board. So we're not often in I'm not usually in conflict with the board, because the board's usually, I have a voice on the board, and I can tell the board what I think. And oftentimes the direction that I want to steer the board into is in line with the cartoons that I'm doing. So I don't know how other cartoonists have dealt with that, but I think they trust me there. I think there's a certain amount of trust in me at the State Journal, and so they let me kind of do what I think is best for the most part.
Yeah. Carol would like to know your favorite cartoon over the years, maybe one that got the most compliments or complaints from the public.
Oh, you know what? I actually have it in this slideshow. Let me ask any other question. I can see if I can get out of this slideshow real quick and I can point that one out, okay?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, while you're looking for it, I can share that Susan wants to say you are a fabulous asset to our community. We appreciate your blend of ideas and polished drawings. From an artist perspective, I am wondering what computer program you use.
So that question first, I will say I'm using a program called Clip Studio, which is, I believe, a sort of knockoff of Photoshop, which is really not very expensive, and it's available on both Mac and PC. It was like $50 for the license for it, but they Photoshop actually, for all of the big bucks you spend on Photoshop, doesn't work well. I use a Surface Pro computer for drawing, and Photoshop doesn't like the Surface Pro, so it doesn't really work with it. And so this Clip Studio program works great with my Surface Pro, and it was like $50, and it's definitely worth trying out. I do know a lot of cartoonists have Apple like iPads, and they use that for digital drawing, which I know a lot of people like that as well, but I've never tried that. And I do a lot of digital work. During the pandemic, I was working from home almost exclusively, and my drawing table's at the State Journal newsroom, and I was drawing on my little laptop almost exclusively. And I usually draw the Mendota Marsh comic strip digitally as well, because that's just easier and faster that way. And
Barbara,
this is my favorite cartoon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Here's the cartoons. Go ahead.
This was an Arizona-style immigration law in Wisconsin, and I imagine what that would look like. And I imagined a police officer stopping Chorizo and asking him for his papers. So the hybrid of sports and Wisconsonness and the politics, I thought was great. Of course, this cartoon was fun to draw too. This one's hanging in Tommy Thompson's office after he broke his arm water skiing. Tommy Thompson injured in a water skiing accident. And he says, "I knew I shouldn't have let Steve Nash drive the boat." That's hanging in Tommy's office now. So that was a fun cartoon.
Did you have one that did blow up in terms of complaints and caused a big uproar, or anything close to that?
The cartoon I did with the telling the defund the police cartoon, where I was criticizing the left for their defund the police rhetoric, that got a lot of complaints. And another cartoon I did about defunding the police, actually, there's a angry progressive Twitter group, or group of Twitterers out there. The angry Twitter left really doesn't like me very much at all. And in fact, this is maybe indelicate to say, but after one cartoon, a witch on Twitter put a curse on a part of my body.
Oh no!
After, I mean, it didn't do anything, but it was it was pretty inappropriate. So yes, I have been cursed by a voodoo witch.
You mentioned that you, when Trump got banned from Twitter, that it made your life better or more enjoyable. And it made me wonder if you had ever received the wrath of a Trump Twitter tweet.
No, I mean, I kind of wish that would be click gold, right? To have Trump diss you on Twitter. No, I did not ever receive. I don't think Donald Trump ever read political cartoons besides there is a pro-Trump cartoonist named Ben Garrison, who actually he's just nutty and a conspiracy theorist. I think I can say that objectively. And he actually got invited to the White House at one point, and then promptly uninvited after they found out all these anti-Semitic tropes in his cartoons. I mean, not like critical of the state of Israel anti-Semitic, but like, get rid of the Jews anti-Semitic stuff. So but there are, I mean, I think Trump knew who he was. I'm not sure he knew that any other political cartoons existed. He doesn't read newspapers.
Barbara says, "I love the way you poke fun at some of us in the community. For example, the raging grannies of Madison."
Oh, yes.
Your satire with Scott Walker in 2015, comparing protesters to ISIS being annoyed by our singing, was fabulous.
Oh yeah, that ended up in a book that the Raging Grannies did. Yes, and that was a fun cartoon. Yeah, Scott Walker, yeah, seemed to think that he knew how to deal with terrorists because he had dealt with little old ladies who sing in the Capitol building.
We, your latest cartoon that I noticed anyway, the one that it deals with Rodgers and COVID and, well, the little girl getting the shot. I am seeing that being shared all over the place. And the Rodgers one, where he's hacked. Is that going viral? Is that a cartoonist goal to have a sports figure like that saying what he said?
I mean, I don't know if it's cartoonist gold. I mean, people in Wisconsin love the Packers. Rodgers is a national sports figure who, I mean, it's a little bit weird because I think before this last week, Rodgers was sort of we did a podcast about this actually. There was sort of this unsaid thing where the left sort of liked Rodgers because they felt like he was kind of the smart California guy. He was the host of Jeopardy, and the right was into Brett Favre because he was the country boy from down south. But they're all just athletes. We shouldn't idealize athletes. But it is cartoonist gold. If it goes, I don't know what viral means anymore. I mean, maybe it's viral for me to have a couple hundred shares and likes on an image. And if it gets out there, that's great. I don't, but I'm not, I'm not in it for the clicks. I'm in it because I really care about, I draw cartoons that I want to have an impact on people's lives. And sometimes those are the ones that don't get shared a lot because they're maybe a little deep, maybe a little complicated, and not everyone, they're not shareable on Facebook, but they really tell an important story and maybe get a point across in a very strong way. But the Rodgers stuff is just fun.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, not all of the cartoons are funny. They are, some of them are quite solemn. That George Floyd cartoon where you had the virus saying, "I thought I was insidious," was very, very powerful and not funny in the least.
No, and I think there is a misconception that cartoons always have to be funny. I think that, and some of the best cartoons aren't at all. They're just making a very strong point and making people think. And I think that's I like doing that. That's part of the job that I like a lot, is maybe not always being hilarious.
Yeah. So what do you think that the editorial cartoon has power in changing minds or has influence when it comes to public policy?
Yeah, it has to, right? Otherwise, what am I in
Right.
it? I sure hope so. I mean, I think if anything, I hear all the time, I get the weirdest, I hear this from people all the time, and I think it's a strange thing to say, but people often say that I keep them sane in troubling times, that somehow my cartoons are provide some sort of sanity and comfort to people, and which is a nice thing to hear. And so I think that's one of the good things that cartoons can do, is they can really, they can comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, as the old cliche goes.
Yeah. So what's next? I mean, you mentioned the Sunday cartoon, but and do you already know maybe, today what you'll be looking at for Monday or Tuesday?
Well, it sounds like Congress has done something with passing a spending bill, and so there'll probably be more on that in the coming week. And then oftentimes I am very much day to day. So what's the big deal in Monday's paper often, or Sunday's paper often inspires what's Tuesday's cartoon. And it also looks like this sounds like the city council in Madison is going to put its foot down on bus rapid transit, and there's going to be a kerfuffle with that and the mayor. Unfortunately, just as I've always been a big fan of the bus rapid transit system, and I support it thoroughly. I have some questions about whether it needs to be on State Street, and I'm worried the mayor's inflexibility on this is going to delay the entire project by years. That was unnecessary when she could have, just maybe had a little flexibility on State Street and downtown. And now it looks like the council is going to dig its heels in and try and negotiate every single stop and station design on the system, which is bad. So maybe I can figure out how to do a cartoon about that. I'd like to.
Well, good place to leave it. I know you have to get ready for the birthday party. So
I do, yes.
Phil, thank you so very much for this. It was a fascinating presentation and very entertaining too. We appreciate it.
Well, good. And I'm always happy to come back whenever you need somebody to talk about issues in Madison or cartoons. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'll let you guys finish up your meeting without me.
Yeah, and you can unshare your screen. I'm sure you would do that.
Yes.
Anyway. Then we can we'll just proceed because we have some business to attend to. We have to award our youth grants. It's time for the Madison Civics Club to award our youth grants, something that we do during each forum to recognize and support school and community groups that are doing civic work that benefits the participants and benefits the community. We are awarding 2 grants today. Each is for $500. We are awarding these youth grants to the Literacy Network of Dane County and the Black Student Union at Madison East High School. We are going to planning on starting with the Literacy Network. Its mission is to teach reading, writing, communication, and computer skills to Dane County adults so they can achieve financial security, well-being, and deeper engagement with their families and the community. We have a couple of representatives joining us from the Literacy Network. Joining us is the director of the Literacy Network, Jeff Burkhart, and the intern program manager, UW-Madison student Lindsay Knuth. Jeff, I know that you asked a question in chat and I didn't have time to personally respond to it. We don't have time for a long presentation. This is just a couple of minutes long, but I wanted to ask who is served by the Literacy Network?
Sure. Literacy Network serves adult learners who are working on their reading, writing, and language skills. And we're talking about community literacy here today. And one of our programs where Lindsay is an intern. And that program provides one-on-one tutoring with volunteers. It's one of our biggest volunteer-driven programs. And Lindsay is one of 10 interns who plan individualized lessons for their class of 8 tutor learner pairs. So these are folks who have been in programs for many years with Literacy Network. And as you can see here on the screen, we in this year have had 17 interns, 150 volunteer tutors, and 139 adult learners. And this is kind of the structure of the program. We have group leaders like Lindsay, who then serve the tutor and student pair, as you can see in this illustration. And so I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay to talk about her own personal experience, and I'll share an image here of one of our classes. So you can kind of see this is obviously a pre-pandemic picture, but Lindsay is actually in this classroom in person with the program. So Lindsay, can you talk about your experience?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. So I am Lindsay. I am a junior at UW-Madison, and I'm a group leader for the CL intern group, or for my class. So I have 8 students and 8 tutors. All of the students are low income Dane County residents, although a lot of them haven't lived here all their lives. We have immigrants and refugees from over 60 countries. And our students come in all different levels of English proficiency. I have one student who never learned to read or write in his native language, so we're working on reading street signs and things like that, so he can move up in his job and really just start to interact with the community. We're learning alphabet sounds with him and things like that. And then on the other end, I have a student who's very advanced in English, and his favorite thing is to learn slang and idioms and idiomatic expressions in the English language. So he taught me some really cool Spanish idioms, and that's just a way to connect with our learners. Technology is another really important topic. Imagine trying to send an important email or talk on the phone with a doctor in a language you don't understand. So we work on things like signing off emails and talking on the phone. And I'll end this off by just talking about two long-term literacy network students. I have Philly Berto in my class right now. He's from Mexico, and when he came in 2017, he spoke very little English, but then he wanted to become a waiter at the restaurant he was dishwashing at. And now he is a waiter. He's in my class, and we're still working on all words food. And he has his eyes set now on owning his own barbershop someday. And then Elena, she went to college in Peru. So we have a lot of college educated students, which is sometimes a misconception that they're all not educated at all. But, you know, really we have some high level learners who are just learning a new language for the first time. So in the US, she works in housekeeping. So she uses a lot of English in her daily life. And we work on improving that with her. And these are just a few of our awesome students. So thank you everyone for having us.
Well, Lindsay, let me ask you a question. Why did you decide to get involved with the Literacy Network, and how have you benefited from the work that you do?
Absolutely. So I'm an English and philosophy major. So doing this was kind of a step out of my comfort zone, but I applied because I had tutored at Madison East High School, and I'm a writing tutor at Madison, and I really love teaching, and my dad's a teacher. So I applied to this, and this is my first experience in ESL tutoring, and I love it. I took Spanish all through high school, and just actually getting to go in person with the pandemic, it's been really, really beneficial to go in person once a week and see people's faces and see people benefiting from just talking to someone else in English is really inspiring, and it's easy to do work when it's rewarding. So that's what I'm too.
Wonderful. And Jeff, how do you envision using the Madison Civics Club grant? Oops, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. We envision using this to help support the materials that our students are going to need throughout the year. So we use a lot of different materials, books, and of course copying fees to reproduce some materials. So we'll be supporting it in that way.
Sounds like a very, very worthwhile program, very important program. How can others get involved, Jeff?
We always have volunteer opportunities. So if you go to our website, litnetwork.org, and you look at the volunteer page, you will find a lot of information, and we'll be happy to connect with you and follow up on your interest.
Well, this has been spectacular, complete with a PowerPoint presentation. We appreciate it. Jeff Burkhart and Lindsay Canoe, thanks so much. And congratulations, the check is in the mail.
Thank you so much.
We are now going to be awarding our second youth grant. Our next youth grant is going to the Black Student Union at Madison East High School. We have two members of the Black Student Union joining us, Gordon Allen and Samuel Can. And we also have with us Madison East School psychologist, Mylea Overton. So I'm looking to see that we have everybody. Yes, it looks like we do. Mylea, please tell us about the mission for the Black Student Union at East.
Good morning. Thank you to the Madison Civics Club. Thank you so much for having us. Special thank you to Barbara Arnold, who reached out, who saw the letter, and to Christy for connecting us. So the Black Student Union, I am just now joining. I am the new one of the new advisors for it, and so I will speak a little bit, but I will definitely lend it to our president, Fifi Samuel, as he is the president and can talk more about the student-led organization. But our mission for BSU, we serve as an organization that fosters Black student development through diversity, academics, and social services. In addition, the objective is to continue to promote excellence and self-enrichment by the way of community service and volunteerism. And so that's what we try to do here at BSU. I want to put emphasis on that it is a student-led organization. So all of these projects, things we want to communicate to the students are led by students. And I am just one of the adults that sign papers, push things, things that you may need adults for. So I will hand it over to Fifi to tell us some more information about BSU.
Yeah, BSU this year started off with no advisor, but we've been able to come together, me and my leadership board, to create a group that's been engaging and inspiring to Black students at Madison East High School. We've also worked with other schools in terms of like creating events, and we're looking towards potential volunteering and fundraising opportunities for our annual BSU trip at the end of the year, or HBCU trip, where we go and visit various HBCUs across the nation. But yeah, BSU is a really welcoming group for students who are looking to empower Black students and be allies.
I understand that you co-wrote this letter that was just referred to. It was a statement condemning the Asian American hate crimes that spiked nationwide and in Wisconsin earlier this year. It really did impress a lot of people, and I'm wondering, why did you decide to speak out on that issue and write that letter?
This is around the time when, especially like the beginning of COVID, where a lot of Asian hate crimes were occurring, and we wanted to make sure that our Asian counterparts were able to understand that we are like providing support and willing to be allies for them. Because I know when there's the Black Lives Matter movement, we had a lot of support from those other affinity groups. And so we just wanted to show that, you know, when other people are going through things too, we're also going to be, you know, compliant in assisting them and providing resources on whatever they need and showing our support.
We have a comment from Barbara Arnold, who was one of our members and first to notice that letter. She said that East High's BSU is a model student group learning what it means to engage in activism on issues that young people care about. Why are you, Samuel, involved in the Black Student Union, and why is it important to you?
I've been in BSU since my sophomore year. I know that before I didn't really know much about BSU. I didn't really know like anything really. And when I did join it, like the first year I joined it, I was on the leadership board, and I realized that this is really a group that, you know, has a lot of power to make a change. I think it's one of the most I think it's one of the strongest groups at East, and one of the more organized ones as well. We really pride ourselves on how well we are able to work with ourselves and others on, you know, creating events and creating spaces that feel safe for not only our members, but even opening up to other groups as well. We're really collaborative, and like we're willing to work with anyone who has like ideas to support our community, and anyone who needs support to support theirs.
Excellent. And Mylea, just one last comment from you. How do you envision the group using the grant?
Yeah, Fifi touched on it a little bit, but due to so every year the BSU usually takes a trip to visit historically Black colleges and universities, just to expose our students to different college opportunities that they may not see here in Wisconsin. So we envision that money being helped to fundraise to pay for different expenses that we may need. And so due to COVID, we are unsure if we may be able to physically take that trip. So it may be meaning trying to recruit colleges and universities to come to us so we can still give that experience to our club members.
Thanks to both of you very much for being with us, and congratulations. And I'll say the same thing, the check is in the mail. Let me thank everybody for being with us. Our next Madison Civics Club program will be on Zoom again on Saturday, January 29th at 10 a.m. It will be on the Civic Health of Wisconsin. Our speaker will be Mary Beth Collins, the Executive Director of the Center for Community and Nonprofit Studies at UW-Madison. Mary Beth is one of the authors of a recent major report on the civic health of Wisconsin. Apparently, we're doing well in some areas, but we could be doing better in many others. There is a statewide effort underway to improve and to track the progress of the civic health of Wisconsin. We will be learning more about that in our January 29th forum. Zoom registration will probably open up in early January after the holidays when all of you are ready to get back to work. Speaking of work or volunteering, we need you. We need your civic involvement with the Madison Civics Club, specifically to serve on our board of directors. At least 2 of our longtime board members are ready to step off the board, and we need new leaders to step forward. If you would like to be a co-chair of the Madison Civics Club, overseeing all aspects of the operation here, or treasurer of the Madison Civics Club, overseeing financial activity like youth grants, giving them out anyway. If you would like to serve in any other capacity, please email the Madison Civics Club at info@madisoncivicsclub.org. And one of us will be getting back to you to answer any questions and hopefully to sign you up. We really do need new leaders to step forward to keep the club functioning into the future and hopefully getting us back to in-person events later next spring and beyond. On behalf of the Madison Civics Club, I'm Joy Cardine. We wish you a wonderful holiday season, and I hope to see you next year. Bye, everybody.